recent judgments of the POCSO courts, we honestly just wanted to evaluate how exactly when our justice system works. And while we don't have fancy graphics and stuff, we just like to introduce and talk about the issues and how it works and hopefully change it on some level. Now, we'd just like to begin with how a basic courtroom works with the most famous person of all, the judge. And he sits there, they rather, whatever, that doesn't matter, gender doesn't matter, with a fancy wig and becomes cool and looks like, I don't know what they look like. Then you have this lawyer here, represented by Sunny Deol, and called the public prosecutor. The public prosecutor is actually appointed by the government, and the job of the public prosecutor is to just represent the interests of the government. Why is the government always involved, you ask? I mean, any crime is not said to be committed against an individual. Crimes are committed against society as a whole. So, as a result, it's not me, the victim of the crime, who gets to appoint the lawyer. It's the government who represents society as a whole. So, that's the logic. This obviously runs into a lot of problems. For example, you have, even though it said that the state government appoints prosecutors in courts, which part of the state government? The Home Ministry, Law Ministry, Governor? No one really knows. Even in cases like Odisha, which this time is surprisingly relevant, which have independent bodies of prosecutions. The fact is that even in those cases, the promotions and the appointments of the heads of offices is still upon politicians. So politicians are still in charge of who prosecutes the case. Even on top of that, they don't have independent investigations. They're still dependent on the police for that, and as a result, they are pretty much have their hands tied behind their back by the police. So their prosecution doesn't really work independently. Also, in case you're wondering why none of these guys have eyes, it's because Kanun Anda hai. So yeah. Anyway, so the defense lawyer is the person who represents the accused, the person who's been accused of any crime. And I mean, while most of us, for example, me, after I upload this video, can probably get a lawyer because you can afford one, most people in this country can't. And as a result, we had smart constitution founding fathers who said, these shall have the right to a lawyer. That's from the 10 commandments of India. 10 commandments, why did I 10 twice, but of the constitution of India. That is something I just made up, please don't actually believe it, but yeah, those from the 10 commandments. Latin mein likhega ab main. But the point is that they said that everyone has a right to lawyer. Who appoints that lawyer? That's too difficult a question, they said. Shrugs is the answer. No one knows. And this situation actually got so bad that you had courts in Bihar, prisoners in Bihar, be in prisons years after their sentence was over. And they didn't even know. They couldn't approach a court. And this is when a lot of courts had to step in and just brought in and be like, bro, chill. Matlab, if someone knows that something wrong is going on, you can find a PIL. A PIL is a public interest litigation. That if you know something wrong is going, then you can take someone to court. You don't need to be directly involved. सामने घर में आग लगी है तो भी फायर इंजन बुला सकते हो, अपने घर पे नहीं बुलाना सिर्फ. But yeah, I mean, the fact that this had to be devised by judges and not parliament actually brings us pretty nicely to the power of judges. Now, the judge actually has power. The judge's power is actually in two parts. You can call it procedural power, what is the fancy part of it, the objection, overruled, objection, sustained, ये वो फलाना फलाना ढिमकाना, सब पीना, ये पीना, वो पीना वाले terms, that's the procedural power. The other power is the substantive power. Substantive power is pretty much just verdict कि सही कौन गलत कौन. In the words of Himani Singh from Best of Luck Nikki, तू सही सी मैं गलत सी. So that's that part of it. But anyway, apart from that, the fact is that this is too much power and too much pressure for one individual. I mean, you're giving them charge of how the courtroom functions, what comes out of the courtroom, who gets to be in the courtroom, and what they get to say. This is too much power and too much pressure for one individual. So it's no wonder that we are in a backlog. One person cannot handle this sort of system. How do we solve this, you ask? Now, there's something called a jury, and that's used as an alternative. What's a jury? I mean, if you've seen The Office or 12 Angry Men or Ek Ruka Hu'a Faisla, I mean, many movies. A jury is basically 12 people, who's generally 12, who sit and watch what's happening in a courtroom. And these people are selected randomly from the public. They're paid for the given length, phalana phalana. But basically, they watch and they get to decide who's guilty and whether the person is guilty or not. Why call 12 completely unqualified persons? It actually makes more sense than it looks at first sight. First of all, an advantage is that they have no bias, right? The fact is that since their paychecks aren't at stake, since their jobs aren't at stake, uh, they won't have any role to play, right? Like, फर्क नहीं पड़ता उनको क्या हो, वो करके चले जाएंगे, they'll go back home, so that doesn't matter. The second part is actually very close to this, that they don't know anyone there, right? One thing which people don't realize is that judges, before becoming judges, are lawyers. So in a lot of times, the defenders or the public prosecutors are friends of the judges or acquaintances or enemies, and those personal elements can come into the game sometimes. And that's what a jury prevents. A jury prevents things like that from happening. Um, if you say, the common question at this stage is, "Arey, what if the person on the jury is also a friend of the accused?" In that case, those kinds of background checks are done, and it's ensured that nothing like that happens. And the lawyers can bring it up if they have an issue with any of the jurors. The third part, and this is the most important part, and why it's relevant to the POCSO judgment, the Prevention of Child Special Sexual Assault Act, Sexual Offences Act, is that it prevents literal interpretations, prevents technicalities from taking place. Right. If you have three people involved in the case, the public prosecutor, the defendant, and the judge, these are three people who are going to spend their lives in law. They don't understand the heart and souls of why a law gets made or whether something should be right or wrong. They're just going to stick to the law. What a jury ensures is that you don't stick to the law. The reason this judgment had to be issued in Mumbai about sexual assault at the breast is that the judge had no choice with the literal word to word interpretation of the law. But the fact is that had jurors been there, they would have brought a human element to it. They would have allowed people, they would have allowed the spirit of the law to be looked at. I mean, the fact is that in many cases you cannot strike them down because of how the fact that the judge will have to face consequences. There have been fatwas issued against judges or threats by Hindu terrorists, both ways. And the fact that, for example, unelected bodies like the All India Muslim Personal Law Board get to make laws like 15-year-olds getting married is stupid and there's no defense for it. Minors should not be allowed to get married. But anyway, the UCC is a debate for another day. So the arguments against this are actually come from, as most problems do, from Akshay Kumar, the legend himself. Now there's a case actually which he made a movie on, because why not, called the Nanavati case. And it's a very famous case. I mean, a lot of you might have heard of it. So what happened here was Nanavati, KM Nanavati, was a naval officer who'd gone on duty, and when he returned back to Mumbai, he discovered that his wife was having an affair with someone. So as you do, he took out a bullet and he shot that person in anger and turned himself into the police. Now, because of the fact that there is a provision in Indian law which allows murder to not be treated as murder but as homicide if you're very angry or reasonably provoked, the jury there actually chose to acquit him. They said that he wasn't guilty, and as a result, they let him go. And this was used by many elite lawyers, Amir log, by an argument of why you cannot trust the people with justice argument. You're letting them elect the people, but that's obviously not relevant. So what happened is that the Bombay High Court finally found him guilty. But the part which is most often ignored here is that the governor, Vijay Lakshmi Pandit, sister of Jawaharlal Nehru, actually pardoned him on no basis apart from the fact that she pretty much felt bad for him. So it's justified when an elite does it, but not when the common man. Anyway, I digress. But speaking of elitism, there are actually a lot of arguments for elitism within the jury, especially in North India, from such as the Allahabad High Court or the Delhi High Court, that there are aspects of elitism within judges, and things like these is what led to the 14th Law Commission of India actually recommending abolishing of jury, which happened in 1973, if I'm not, yeah, with 1973, with the last ones being conducted in West Bengal. But the fact is that, speaking of this, we can actually move on to bigger courts. I mean, you can't have juries in the Supreme Court because those issues are legal. They aren't issues of morality. You need qualified people there. So, how the issues at the Supreme Court level are actually more complicated. Because of the fact that a judge has to retire, they have to look for alternatives once they retire. What do you do? I mean, no one likes just sit around. So as a result, what happens is that judges try to curry favor. And curry favor, I don't mean curry patta or anything. I just mean get favor. I'm sorry, I'm very hungry. It's 3 a.m. and I'm recording this for the seventh time. Anyway, so they try to curry favor and just get favor with the government and the judges on the Supreme Court. Why? Because they want to get onto committees after they retire. I mean, for example, the Farmers Committee which was formed recently, the fact is they want to get appointed to those. Why would anyone want to do that? Obviously, you have influence because ego trips. Everyone high up in government is an egomaniac. Apart from that, you have influence, and mostly you have grants and stipends granted. So you also have a bit of money involved. That's one part of it. Right. And as a result, a solution devised by many countries, for example, the US, is that these people are appointed for life. Appointed for life. If you are going to work here for the rest of your life, you clearly can't work against me afterwards. Haha. That's one approach. I mean, what happens here is that even in case you do choose to retire early, as is your choice, we can't stop you, then you can't go on to another job. You can't become the board of directors, or you can't become a Rajya Sabha MP in a hypothetical situation. Not that anything like that is ever going to happen, but yeah. I mean, now that I've pretty much secured my arrest, I should probably wrap up. Yeah, this has just been Asher Call. Please email us at mediocracy, not mediocrity, @gmail.com if you have any issues. Let me just write this out. Mediocrity, or just subscribe to us on YouTube. We'll have the links in our bios, or Instagram @mediocrityweekly. Please do follow us on Instagram. I'll just plug it. Thank you for giving us your attention. I really appreciate it. This generally means a lot. And just, yeah. Jai Mata Di, Shabba Khair, secularism, no Khalistan. I guess that's where we are now.